Sleep and rise anew, and your health may it bring you. Bright darling of my heart, bright darling of my heart, bright darling of my heart, bright darling of my heart. Thanks a million. I'm just going to do one more for you, and this is another lullaby. I'm downing my scale this time. As you can see here at the front, it's got some keys, so it's a bit like a scale, chromatic scale from C to C. And like.
Do you know what that is? Where that's coming from?
I pulled the wrong fingers, so you get from the thumb off.
Maybe we can work with that one. La 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 me.
Oh yeah.
It's clashing a bit with that note, isn't it? I probably would. Will I give it a go? Landing mirror, like so. So, as I was saying, this is a chromatic scale from C to C, so you can choose any number of notes in the middle to make whatever kind of chord you like, and you can make major chords and minor chords, and you can do suspended and diminished and so on and so forth, all within this simple scale here. So I'm going to take this down a notch. I was in D for the last one, and I was using a perfect fifth for that, and I'm just using I just do a unison note, just an octave apart there in a C. So. It's nice. It's kind of contemporary. It's nice and angular. Maybe that's better. A little bit more oomph harmonically. In million. Thank you.
Mícheál Ó sin Fiona. We're up against another sound in the background there which has been stopped. Mícheál Ó sin dating éis leat bhd níos faide ná sin go híomhann ar fad, Mícheál Ó. And I think it's beautiful the life you gave to those, beautiful new life you gave to those two poets that you mentioned their work. Absolutely gorgeous, Mícheál Ó. So tá can bugaraig chuig an géad fila eile, and that's Mícheál Ó. Mícheál is Gailbhaché a cha tréimh se fada I dúis gur tasanna agus go bhfiostam Mícheál lonatha I limnach na léanta so. Is fila gailge agus astrathóir agus an leabhar stéine uig ná leabhar na naistear iver 3. Fáilte rót bhí agus mé súil go mór le éisteach leat agus go éirí leat.
Ja, gur míle maigi bhil an buíocha sochraí a bháil le Paul agus le Julie. Asocht an cuireadh seo, just thanks very much.
Just bugging it on, like what just was for
Oh, I know. Yeah, just like to thank Paul and Julie for the invite. It's a privilege to be amongst such artistic company. So, like Jacker, the sin gohívan gáilin ar fad ag Fiona and sin. So, Harvard Jacker sin a haru. But anyways, yeah, these poems in a way they do connect with some of the sadness that Fiona mentioned in some of the songs that she sang earlier. They're mainly to do with the people who kind of left Ireland maybe in the 50s and 60s, or a little bit later than that as well. I lived in England for a good few years myself, and worked in Irish centres over there. And I suppose some people coped with emigration by kind of pretending in their minds that they'd always go home again, you know what I mean? And sort of having a dream version of Ireland, you know, the ashling turned inside out, I suppose. And other people, I suppose, cope by just forgetting about it, you know, and depending on their experience back here. So some of these poems are kind of short because I was trying to get feeling into them, and it's very difficult to get an aftertaste or a feeling or an atmosphere, I think, if the poem is too long, you know. So I prefer kind of shorter poems, but okay, so just a lot of them are in the form of, I suppose, of a dialogue where somebody's writing from home to say how things are at home in Ireland. And bear in mind, I suppose this is kind of urban, severely urbanized Ireland, and they're describing what's happening at home, and often in terms of nature, you know, because a lot of the people who went to Leeds and Liverpool and Manchester, who my own relatives, there's still people going. I have sisters in England myself who are younger than me. A lot of them were, you know, they were moving from a rural background, like a lot of the people from Jamaica and the West Indies as well, into very urbanized environments. So it must have been a hell of a culture shock, to be honest with you. So a lot of the poems are about nature and what's happening kind of at home, and then the person replies and says a sort of a dialogue, I suppose, what's going on abroad. And I suppose in a way, with email and all the rest of it, you know, the art of writing notes and letters to people is dying out a bit. So anyway, so should dawn on a bheag on a yar faoin maile agus denégan a kind of free bánú na tuatha, you know. Someone talking about how the villages are kind of emptied, and we know that that's been a major problem in recent decades in Ireland, but it's always been a problem, to be honest. It's not something new. So where the young people are leaving, and you know, there's maybe only elderly people or children left. So just bailile. Sinna bhfuil fágtha anois, dlí uaignach an chruataí Fair, sorry, imaha, viantas. So it's just 3 lines. Home. It's all that's left now is curlew's lonely cry. Summer grass run wild. Cuimhná Amháin. So a lot of people would have memories, I suppose, of Ireland, and they might recall it to you when they had a few drinks on them, or after they heard someone singing or whatever. So one memory from one elderly woman: Sa fór chúil ag bailú cloch, I lorg Cocoon on chun trácha. Scéalta beaga ón ihir a péca, an grá ag bláthú gan chuine. Single memory. In backfield gathering stones, in dusk silent footprints, small stories sprouting from the earth, love blossoming at the strangest hour. So I suppose a lot of that generation, they often call them the silent generation, because the people were so busy working and sending money home, which actually was it's not acknowledged in Ireland enough, but it was often the prelude to the Celtic Tiger, to be honest. The remittances, as they call them, are people sending money home to their families, to kind of, get up on the ladder a little bit economically. So, and they did a lot of the men. It's well known. A lot of the men worked in construction and hard physical labour, and a lot of the women worked maybe in there's trouble at the moment in England about it now, in the nursing area, and kind of as nannies and as in the caring professions, etc. So sometimes that generation has said, like, well, how come very few of them left kind of accounts of their lives, or in poetry or in novels or anything like that. But actually, a lot of the time, they were so exhausted at the end of the day, they didn't have time. And as well as that, I know a lot of my own relatives, say, who would have left young. I can think of one family where, say, the dad died very young, and there was a large family, and the boys all had to leave after national school, So a lot of them hadn't a huge amount of education either. So fuam na deoríochta, what emigration sounds like. Báisteach ar a miniog. Cuoine gear is an tost a lenan. Fuam imachta gan filla. So what immigration sounds like. Rain on my window, early birds' short cry, and the silence afterwards. The sound of leaving and never returning. A lot of the people as well were, I suppose, inevitably from maybe more rural and poorer areas where there wasn't a lot of employment, and there was a habit of immigration, I suppose, for centuries. So, of course, that has impacted hugely on the Irish language as well, because if all the young people are leaving in every generation. Tránón na Gaeilge, the evening of the Irish language. You can read into these things what you want yourself. This is Ballychlár na Gaillimhe, Conde na Gaillimhe, a village near where I grew up myself. It was actually a village where the older people still spoke Irish until very recently, because Marion F, who was a famous kind of Republican nationalist, he taught in the school there for quite a few years until he was broken out of his job, brished out as a fuss, because of his. He was too Republican, I suppose. So Tránón na Gaeilge, anghrianna dul faoi is spéirich lé, an chuach go brónach ag léach, gan gá le focail. Evening of the Irish language. The sun sets in a clear sky. cuckoo calling sadly. No need for words. So this next one is called Dawn na Gaeilge. I wrote it for a man who's a painter from not far from where I'm living here, where I'm living at the moment in Limerick and working. It's called The Poem of the Irish Language. Leohna an trónóna is an fér ó hAodha saor agus siaracha. Áilleach na gréine déanaí ach gan na focail le ní ógurt doin. Mochachain na fáilbháis sulas silítaríd. Aisling míle blian sa dáin garid seo. So Poem of the Irish Language. The evening breeze blows the grass this way and that. The late sun's beauty, but no words to proclaim it. Feelings dying before they are born. The dream of 1,000 years in this short poem. So Chuala Ceol Marialler an Gaeltacht maybe a fáilbháis, my Cullen is Gaeltacht donna bheoga imel na carach sa Gaillimh, but it's become a commuter belt for it's become a very exclusive area now to live because it's right on the edge of Galway City. But it was quite cut off for a long time, which is probably why the Irish language survived so long. And I have relatives out there. So it's called An Down a Gimachtas, my Cullen. I wrote it for Anhara Thomas. She's a Welsh activist, I suppose, and novelist and children's writer. I actually translated one of her books there a while ago. I did my best to translate it anyway from Welsh. An Down a Gimachtas, my Cullen. An solas an bhuineoga titim, agus anga Shanavali siad fós faoi cheilt. Is sisternach an isce is clocha á cheartlú, is ceol na néan uidnach, is saoirí flúirseach le solas, is seandaí na séite ganach an sean scéal céin acu, a bhocla bora le cinúint. So it's about the Irish language and its possible fate, I suppose. Disappearing world, my Cullen, County Galway. Light falling on the window and on marks of old walls still hiding, and whispers of water circling stone, and the music of lonely birds, and summers abundant in the light, and breathless old people whispering the same old story, their words fecund with fate. Seo ceann go thomláin difriúil tugadh sé foláiribh do má héime Harama, Julia. Okay. This is one about, I suppose it was kind of, it wasn't an issue that was discussed much in Ireland until recent times, because it was sensitive, I suppose, was about, and I'm thinking of a particular village in Galway City, the Claddagh, which was a fishing village where the Irish language actually survived for quite a long time because people from Connemara were coming in with fish and with boats and with turf, etc., into the Claddagh. So even though it's right in the middle of the city, and the people have their own kind of character, I suppose, and they had their own king at one stage as well. Pádraig Ó Conradh, the writer, actually lived there for a while in a small cottage there. But anyway, and a huge amount of the families in the Claddagh, like in other cities in Ireland, they were reliant on the war pension from the British, you know what I mean, where called it the widow's pension sometimes, and it's incredible to think it now, but that young lads used to actually join the army knowing that they're probably more than likely going to be killed, do you know what I mean, even lying about their age, and this is in World War I in particular, to know that their family would be looked after, do you know what I mean? Or they'd take the place of someone else, they'd lie and take the place of someone else. That happens sometimes as well in very poor families. So, but anyway, it was something that wasn't discussed because I suppose we were trying to get independence from Britain for so long, and it was kind of, yeah, it was just one of those things. It was easier not to talk about. A little bit like the Civil War in Ireland, I suppose, for many years as well. I know my own grandparents on one side, they both came from different sides in the Civil War. So I remember when my grandmother was very old, I asked her, she outlived her husband by 30 years. I said to her, I got her at a weak moment and said, how did you deal with that then? You know what I mean? That you were from such family and he was from, now there was probably matchmaking going on that time anyway, but she said, well, the way we dealt with it was we just didn't talk about it. Do you know what I mean? At all. So and actually football and hurling, she was from Kerry, so football was a great healer as well. You know what I mean? Because football was more important, a little bit like Liverpool, it was more important than life and death itself. Do you know what I mean? So, and they used to allow the guys who were on the run, say, the Free State during the Civil War, they used to allow the guys who were on the Republican side to come in and play in Tralee in the Munster final. And they were given an hour or so to leave afterwards. Do you know what I mean? And then they were fair game to be shot, but playing for Kerry was more important. So anyway, I suppose in a sad kind of a way, this has become it's gone full circle really. Now that we're discussing kind of the conflicts of the past and different identities in Ireland and all the rest of it, and how we had quite a complicated identity in many ways because of colonisation. Now we have a war, unfortunately, in another part of Europe, which is, violence again, kind of thing, and what are going to be the consequences of that, I suppose, down the line. And again, in the Ukraine, just from the basic stuff that I know, a lot of the people are mixed between both ethnic groups, like Russian and Ukrainian, etc., and it's very complicated. So at the front, 1916. Nor a hosn na gunny sa gera, ni roilat riamh go raibh an bás sa ginneadh orchala sna trinshi, Tosk ni rá a chuairt. Ná a rian is súile na mílte maravan, ná sa bhréantas a dag sé ina dhia. Mahánach an bás an éanachar, is go fáilí a rá trí na trinshi fola is teanga, trí scáhan scoilte an bhaidnacháin, is alagar scuilte na néin, an rian, Irene fós náit her. At the front, 1916, when the guns finally went silent, you wouldn't have thought that death had ever lurked in the trenches. There was no log of its passing, no trace in the eyes of 1,000 dead corpses, or in the stench that it left in its wake. If death visited it all, it must have passed furtively between the trenches of blood and language, between the cracked mirror of early dawn, or the loose talk of the birds, the sun that still rises in the east. Ceann seo tá sé cinál uignach agus tá cua buint leis stocha mar it's a lonely poem, I suppose, and it's kind of, again, it's quite relevant to maybe the Ukrainian situation, but also to, if it would have affected a lot of Irish families as well over the years, is, somebody who would have somebody belonging to them maybe buried abroad, do you know what I mean? And that they couldn't afford to, or they couldn't happen at the time or whatever, that they couldn't bring them back here, say, and increasingly people are buried abroad now anyway, they don't come back. So, but traditionally, I suppose, in a lot of the Gaeltacht areas, the people wanted to be buried kind of back here if they could. So it's about a woman who's saying to her son, who's dead, like a young son, that because I couldn't visit you, I'm sorry, that I couldn't visit you, So, Tusk nach ramen an cuairte thuairt dóigh roada again. Máthar dá amach curtha a Peterborough Sasna, Samhain, Cuine na Marav. Haar timpeall arin, ein a cuine ar an ngui. Ein na filiochta a cuine fi chrónú na spéra. Crumha, haar immel na cuivera, na cavera, haringingas Blahanna dit is een droogd fós orthu. O Hebra an bháis is a haringius Blahanna dit. Idir na bali clithe seo, Petil, Yoga, Solish. So, because I couldn't visit your grave too far away, son, a mother to her son buried in Peterborough, England. All around my head and yours, birds crying on the wind. Birds of poetry crying beneath the darkening sky. Bent over the edge of dawn, I picked you flowers with the dew still on them. From the dead of winter, I picked you flowers. From between these walls of stone, little petals made of light. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm going to finish. So maybe a poem about silence, and this is for Donald Macaulay. He wrote about a lot of the Irish in England a lot. On hAodha Gimocht, the boat leaving. I remember getting that boat actually in the 80s. I know I don't look that old, but I am. So, and it was, everybody was going to London, etc., or further into England, I suppose, a lot of the time. On hAodha Gimocht, the Donald Macaulay, Níjig fe sé go níjig ochton ní. Fair is clocha a gimachtas rairak. Fuin na var in a dust. Fuin on tusta. The boat leaving, for Donald Macaulay, writer, 1926 to 1989. Grass and rocks disappearing. The sound of voices falling silent. The sound of silence. Okay, so Christnome and Shin Ni Hegwil Gachton on a Bronach. It's not that every song is very very sad or anything, but sorry, I have two lines here that were the next time I'll read the more happier poems. Yeah, so just Dawn na Himmerka, 2 lines about, I suppose, that sum up the rest of the poems maybe in a way. Emigration poem. Dawn na Himmerka, Green an Giebra, the Hian Shomra a Corfuhi. Maoilios Caimbeul e Gachemacht. Emigration poem. The winter sun sets in your old room, as if leaving was just another form of return. So, Garmil Magi.
Mahu Vihilux, Garmil Mat Ashin, Unsimul Agustaru, and Garmil Mat. My own dad went to Sasson in the 80s, so I have memories of that. He came back, thank God. He was back and forth, but the 80s were a tricky time. The bugger Ig, Chuig on Gade Illa, and that's Marion F, who is coming to us live from, I'm not sure exactly where, but I know she grew up in the Isle of Barra, or is from the Isle of Barra, grew up in Glasgow City. And she was awarded the New Writers Award from the Scottish, for Gaelic poetry, and from the Scottish Book Trust in 2017. And then in 2018, her first poetry anthology was published, Dartigil Over or Solish Istocha, Cause of Our Joy. Foyt wrote a variant, Ganairi Lat. And fair play to you for dealing with all the technical side of things. So I'll leave it with you.
Okay. Moran Tang, thank you very much for having me. I'll start with this poem on the theme of coastlines, which was commissioned for the St Andrews Poetry Festival. I was restricted to a maximum of 8 lines, which in itself was a challenge. In it, I tried to show the impact made by the Vikings and also the idea that local women, despite the raiding and plundering, must have been attracted to them. The St. Bride bird, or oyster catcher, mentioned at the end, makes a repeated call that sounds in Gaelic as if it is saying, "Be wise, be wise." In terms of the women, it was probable that they gained wisdom after the event. Na lochlanich ko iad. Falt ordvoje, soelen kere, larich ultjach, wanneer genenier. Na longen kokkie sjaal. King narichen chillikig koop. Loskig na skarren, skris agus rippiken chinje. Nina kan down les moantjen sjalte skare karach. Erich latach in gille bridge. De gaanderach virach. Biklich, biklich. I was one of the Scottish writers commissioned last year to write a poem to commemorate the 250th anniversary of Sir Walter Scott. Many children who went to school in Scotland were introduced to Scott by learning the poem Young Lochinvar. He was probably my first hero, and the poem gave me an awareness of rhythm and rhyme, and maybe the beginning of a love of performing, as it became my party piece. So this poem is my tribute to Sir Walter and to my childhood hero, Lochinvar. I did not know who Lochinvar was or where he came from, except it was the West. From my perspective, aged 9, that could easily have been Barra or maybe Kelvin Grove Park. He had a steed and a broadsword, and I knew from dancing the swords in the Highlanders Institute that they could be a weapon of mass destruction. But no, he tricked them all at Netherby Hall, especially the bridegroom, a twit, who could only stand by twirling his hat as Lochinvar danced his lady in a galliard out of the door, lifted her onto the saddle and rode off. No broadsword required. That was the end of the story. But for me, it was just a beginning. New words and fine lines and galloping rhythms pulled me out of the door of room 3, past the confines of Glasgow C5, still searching over bank, bush and scaur for chivalry, freedom, honour, the elusive things that Ivanhoe and Rob Roy and the last minstrel firmly planted upon the native heath of my mind. The next poem refers to a trip I made to Australia in 2014. And during this trip, I was fortunate to have been taken into the bush to visit friends on a farm. We slept in the old dorm once used by the ranch hands, and although it had a shower, the actual toilet was in a tin shed with no door in a field nearby. The absence of a door was to keep the dunny, as they called it, from getting too hot in the daytime. At night, it was frightening to have to walk, or rather run across the field to find the loo. However, despite the primitive sanitary arrangements, there was something magical about being at the farm, hundreds of miles from anywhere, with a blood-red sunset and under the stars of the Southern Cross. My best picture of Australia. It was a toilet with no door, a dunny as they call it, in a field, corrugated iron roof, beasties in the bowl, 100 yards from the ranch hand dorm. And after the red canopy brings the day to its end, I imagine after sunset, a frantic dash. Let me not be eaten by a dingo. I hear the sinister bubuk in the gum tree, gnarled and dry and almost dead. Nimble footsteps scrunch across the malleefowl nest. My heart sucked to my mouth. The kookaburra's wild laughter. Above me, the Southern Cross, transfixed above the yellow moon. 5 icy snowflakes set against a burning desert. A moment in time, a memory to assuage the mysterious aching of my heart. The next poem is about St. Columba. And there are not many facts about St. Columba. However, I wanted to write about him, as the little we know of his life tells us that he was not all that much of a saintly role model. He was brave and a man who would stand his ground. And I think he was also a poet. He made his home in Scotland, though, which is another reason to like him. Colm Cille. There will be no turning back. Culdreimhne behind me, and poor Curnan of Connacht dragged from me to his death. I close my eyes to all of that. Lord, do not abandon me or wield your rod of lightning flames. Set me down upon a verdant plain, where hope shall be your stars that shine, my past dissolving in the night. There will be the flutter of wings as the gentle dove courses our way, and new lights that cast out fear. I will use my words to call the truth on the shores of Dalriada. In the moulding of stones, may my heart not harden, but in the times that will endure, I will move the gentleness in souls from the withering of my own. The next poem is in Gaelic, and it very much reminds me of the partings that my parents experienced because of my father's work in the Merchant Navy, and also the strange gaps that children of sailors experience in knowing their fathers only by their progress across the world on the Atlas. J. Hacul a Keelachach. Chanach gemishiriv mahar agus mavahar a dalse, achun turis. Vacuan fassing iterat nur vamiog. Isen ekmur, esische Eliana Gevern. Famidje weg geroin a spoonit der mare. Ach nur hier agachi la yeshe spacha lagasat. Familan hinge geberuna gans ne filmich in de walm. Nja stoche, gangster. Hoe kamaching koortjen, maar bedriegje gunne dochkichen, a goeie der batichen. Agus soos en stijre de bus, aatjichen kan git. Lenschine, Mícheál a séitjug smoch van de tochtjen suchte schaking, agus joen zich me vraden, ai ra, an de goeien tuin, agus kronlue chluichken in jitten. Het chile gachi on film Away All Boats, van draad reutjes leuwing, harika laaf aan wahed. Le kimmenen uitrum dansen, loos at harischen raad, 4 jaren in een luting. Solish je glensig asul in de carriage, agus fatiksje akumse. Een larne varig, galave. Gav me vaad kruimer me lijf, is sturig me ver tassing en doel. Southampton, Singapore, Sydney, agus beshing goal kan gist. The Isle of South Uist, where I live, is famous for fishing and also for lochs, of which there are hundreds. It also has brilliant sunsets. In this poem, I tried to describe something of the peace and beauty to be found on the lochs, but also the struggle as a writer to find words to describe the beauty that evades description. Fishing. My mind stretches far out, a boat on the spring tide, the hill resting in a pillow of cloud, and on the road, the gravelly choke of cars, across the loch, inquisitive lights, blinking to life, one by one. I love the closing of the day, the sun finally folding down, changing to its red, clinging to its red rim. Far away, the laughter of children, a mother calling, home, home, all in. My line curls up and out and down, the rod curving in a perfect arc. The water is clear, the air at last calm. My heart leaps. Nothing is there, but it is all there. I have no words, only Zulu, butcher, savage points. The next poem is, I suppose every writer has written about the experience of lockdown. Actually, on the islands, it wasn't all bad. We had the opportunity to be outdoors, and the roads were much quieter. There were fewer tourists, camper vans. However, there's always one annoying thing. In my case, a wee bird in my garden. And of course, the TV delivering sad news every night. Stone chat. You lurk and leap around me. With your bold chatter, you quarter the terrain, instinctively distant, but closing in, ungoverned by laws. In the morning, you stalk me, reviewing my washing line, a row of white flags, empty sleeves surrendering in an ill wind. Your staccato chatter like a litany warning. Even in the twilight, obdurate, you migrate to my only tree, swaying gleefully on a scrawny branch. You oscillate, gliding from point to point. You are everywhere, drawing my eye to the corona of the sun. In one stroke, its arms outstretched, injecting the sky with a scarlet flood, and then the blackest of black. My eyes cry with the wind, and you watch me retreat. Inside, I lock myself down to another darkness. The TV is all death tolls, infection rates, pointing fingers, pain spreading without pity. But you, stone chat bird, in the wildest of nights, you are my only constant. Remain here and watch with me. My next poem is about a bear that is going extinct. I was in Edinburgh for a Scottish Book Trust event for winners of the New Writers Award in 2018. And it was due to be held in a venue called Jam House. And I was a bit apprehensive about reading in front of a large audience for the first time. I was in a hotel opposite the venue, which had newspapers and posh magazines on the coffee table. To my surprise, I was able to read about myself and the event I was about to take part in. Alarmed, I picked up the Vogue magazine to distract myself by glancing through the fashion pages, but found quite a serious article about the spectacled bear, Tremarctos ornatus, to give it its Latin name, which is becoming extinct. I wrote this poem while reflecting on the idea of extinction, not just of the bear, but of myself and my Gaelic language. Tremarctus ornatus is in vogue. Quote, new Scottish writers assemble in Edinburgh's Jam House for showcase event, close quote. That was my headline. But leafing through the glossy magazine, I saw yours. We recognized each other. You, the going extinct spectacled bear, shy, elusive, hunted, hated. You are pushed to higher habitats, but rarely retaliate. In your so-called bespectacled eyes, I see me, not in the least ornate or in vogue, sucked from my habitat to Edinburgh, reading poetry to a dying breed, perhaps making a spectacle of myself. And after I scan the glossy, are there people like me in those pages? I only see you, the nearly extinct bear, solitary and arboreal, gaining a kind of fame for dying in the light as your day declines. No more fresh leaves that glisten and restore, and the sun filtering over centuries of trees in Cayambe Coca around Quito, and over Queen's Gardens, Newtown, EH4. There are only the leaves of vogue sustaining you and me. Encircled, we paw the margins of society, my name, like yours, on a page, in a dying language, as I write my own ending. The next poem is one that I wrote about the statue, very large statue built on a hill in Uist. And this was done because in the 1950s, the Ministry of Defence built a rocket firing range on the island of South Uist and a satellite tracking station on a hill called Rouville. At the same time, perhaps as a reprisal, one of the local priests arranged for a 40-foot high statue of the Madonna and Child to be built on Rouville. It is very striking to have these two icons of war and peace on the same hillside. The disputes around this military initiative attracted much publicity at the time, and the press referred to it as the place where religion met radar. The resulting protests inspired the book by Compton Mackenzie and the film Rockets Galore. Some argued that the rocket range brought work to the island, but locally it was regarded as an invasion of Sassenachs. I wrote the poem in a passing place near the statue, just after the tragedy of the Twin Towers in New York. The sun was setting over the Atlantic, and I felt overwhelmed with the beauty and grace of the island in a time when the victims of that event in New York had perished so horribly, and faith seemed to be so challenged. Mor a bheathair sa páiste fan túrairt fare, chan je laket da chun gian, de chúl rí solas nach típer, siad geboin crechig njochentas, en la ciún a crumag fallav, vo velach roival, gemoer farsing, hagrian a tuchtjem, mar gortig falla, mieren tjerk a gachenich, tru skorren en dorgetas. Achuse na tieverach, cool kietach, marichek. Na diavai, do jine lachur, kaatichtje, na tchleoch fianjel. 4 jaren de gruis, stolaan dochisch, maar waher, de vaastje a hokal soos. Kindjach kan de repoi. Fate harish ground zero is Guantanamo. Get hitch lion narachas and small. This last poem was written before I was actually a poet. I taught English, and teaching poetry was always the biggest challenge, as the children found it difficult and often boring. One day I told my class, perhaps rashly, that you could write a poem about anything. A pupil then challenged me to write a poem about a bar of chocolate. So this poem became the first one that I read to an audience. It's called Twix. Between ourselves, Twix is tops, 2 bars in 1, or 1 in 2. We can half it, entre nous. A socially inclusive sweet, an unpretentious double treat. No dark secrets, not one of the greats. I wouldn't serve it after 8. Chocolate, caramel, biscuit slice. Eat it when and where you like. For introductions, it's a winner. Cheaper than asking a girl out to dinner. Sugar, maltodextrin, hydrogenated fat. Not so attractive when you say it like that. No black magic, no sophistication, no handsome, suave man flying mysteriously through the night to bring you this creation. But it's a bar of 2 halves. When you need a fix, if you get to share it, you know you've been twixt. Shinakate, that's my lot. Thank you very much.
Míle buíochas as sin Marion sin go háling agus chodas de cheanga chuisiint gur míle maith. Ag bogar aige das topic, we'll move on to our next poet, Maoilios Caimbeul, all the way from the Isle of Skye, gur míle maith as teacht. And if we have time then afterwards, we'll do a quick Q&A. We'll just ask one question to our guest poets. So Maoilios Caimbeul wrote an Isle of Skye poet who has won numerous awards and writes mainly in Scots Gaelic. He's been awarded numerous prizes. Most recent poetry publications include Gross an Dá Anam and Trocloch na Súla. So tá mé súil go mór le do chuid focail a chluisiint, fáilte wrote a ríist Maoilios agus go mairí leis. Oh no, he said you'll break, no, you'll have to.
Hij maakt weer als aan de nering. Ik vraag ik weer meer muskaarten. En we gaan door gaan naar 3 toeristen maart. Dat is fortune Comorum. It's good to be back in Ireland. I feel I'm among friends when I come here. I was here a few times before on a tourist, what they call Tourist de Mart, on the poets tour of Ireland, and I really enjoyed it when I came.
Sorry.
I'm going to read an early poem I wrote in the 1970s. That's a long time ago. I was quite young then. It mentions John Calvin and it mentions Copernicus, one representing religion and one representing science. I was conflicted at an early age with a conflict between science and religion. I had I suppose you would call it nowadays materialistic worldview that I had. Everything could be explained scientifically, and there was no room for the supernatural. In later life, that was to change. So the poem describes the meaninglessness of life when science is taken to its logical conclusion. Plant mara, sea plant, is plant mara misha a chraag of latich an duur. Utukun hachersen, a chens sound, chens a misk imig chens. a mi anya chuin, when ya getusse kutjach arach an half Calvin, ahar Copernicus as de Hume. Kun an ik la, naar de hucht na reelten, ze vrisje niermeld na plaien, skun de chaiu do jantach chier. Wok mhins toe heen, tuig, marrigen voeren de fallewach, kun riav, kun jul. Sea plant, I'm a sea plant, torn from the shores of the world. Perhaps we'll meet, there's a chance among many, in the middle of the ocean, that you were also reared in Calvin's ground, the pre-Copernicus sky above you. That a day came when the stars fell and the heavens fell to pieces, and you lost the solid ground, afloat, you and I, forevermore in the cold, empty seas, rootless and aimless. The next poem I'm going to read is called Harnastashnych, Over the Threshold. We have moments in our lives when we go over a threshold through a door into another reality. We see things differently. I left the plant poem behind me. This was many years later that I wrote this. Harnastashnych. Harnastashnych le sund, le eier, is an gefach mi bailschig bek, gen grien turn koesteren. Ha mi dal an hlie, le chikuv, le ikkel, is an nach mi kindjach jeharam, nu ma chulv. Get a chunig mi achjal aar, wein warnig. O jegelen, bokken a klozek, ha mi a gavel slaan ri. Gesundig, le chikuv, le jar. Is an gekjaars wa mi gefata, is an a lion strahel, is an a kuriken bla, njauke. O a chlir leesnich, o a chlir hallig, chalakig, hou het de wellig le epert. Tianne le skier na matne. A chiri carnastashnych, a schouderach, en achi vla, gorstel, or is ne palletjen djernach. Hou moeians en holles, en de bjaunt en a geach, en de fastig en engentig vat haar, en de reelt en schier sprei en goed droegkost, het geheimte is je gaan het huin. O engentig, o julich, o a weerwel je griech niet. Over the threshold, I go over the threshold joyfully, elated having seen a little gleam of sunshine through the curtains. I go on the journey doubtful, fearful, because I'm not sure what's ahead or behind. I did see a golden gleam on the everlasting mountain. O soft idols of the pillow, I take leave of you joyfully, with doubt, tearful, because I have been wrong for so long, for the spendthrift days, for the warm and deceitful bed covers. O all-seeing heart, O deceiving, soiled heart, you are killed with sacrifices, flayed by the ninth of the morning. But go over the threshold, don't look back to the warm, comfortable home or to the weather-tight walls. You are out in the light, the mountains are shouting, the marvelous wilderness is before you, the eternal stars are spraying you with dew, stretched out with the endless plain. O marvel, O elation, O unending miracle. I mentioned that in my younger days, I was a materialist. Everything was natural and could eventually be explained by science. How wrong I was. Later in life, I got extraordinary personal proof of the supernatural through things that happened to me personally. We, as my wife and I, tell of some of them in the book Island Conversion. It turned my view of the world upside down, the things that happened. This is just one incident that happened out of the blue. It involves a cat, which was very important. And a cat at the time, a big fluffy cat. And this poem describes how the cat reacted one day. It's the 20th poem of a series where I use the pseudonym David. Un la vrisje sul als nater David. One One day the supernatural world broke in on David. Smuinja kura ni natarach, was science garish, a hulini trologan avestach. O agaibi, Victor Gulrich, na tuisen heer, a levige feper. Kassen a gravel, sudder, na buchtje. Hunenarish, a dinje aan, outlas de heel hoe ze de Hus fisker a hula straun a chacht, se kent is en daar is oskultje. A via na shisu a chan, skriachas amich, a faaltje en husker, wo hier nach Bannigaar. Gataivi, martaal loine sturi karsjuul en jolleter, en jarabig os natera, en sul avestjug, Overen is boeien, a vi geschimpli tudu, maar Horatia a parach gaun na bruter. One day the supernatural world broke in on David. He thought everything was natural, as science reported it, everything through natural law. Ah, David, you little expected it, sitting in your chair, reading the paper. Footsteps on the gravel, clear, unmuffled, to the door. Nobody there. You're going mad, he said to himself. Until in the afternoon he heard the wail of the cat as it faced the open door, his fur standing on end, a shriek from his throat welcoming the ambassador from a land it didn't know. For David, like two bearings on a sailor's chart, the supernatural proof, the normal world, causes and effects. It wouldn't be as simple anymore. Like Horatio, there was more to it than his vision. I'm continually amazed at what science has discovered, from the wonders of the very large to the wonders of the very small, especially the mind-boggling nature of the biological cell. It's amazing when you look into it, what happens in the cell. And this is a poem about the cell, what happens in all our cells. Millions of them working as one. Oran Kalla, the song of the cell. Tia takat se Challa, a down the dull hun la, miren dikke a follows the chin, protein can sneers can fear. And announce a clishen atom, a weer going fee and fjol is cran. Moleculen na upper yever, the leem is down so have reher. The trillinen na gupper callang and a shiens a has sorage. Tie han nach upper heemte, nur niet callen kenen. Lot gales an the gifte, a nula tjuche guniste. A upper callen nach huis juni, gras en jeken staat a tummer. Vision oorlog naar de Chuala, a laantje weerwil en maan. Song of the cell. What's happening in the cell? Every day a dance to tell. Elements hurrying to and fro, proteins forming row on row. In the swift atomic dance, muscles, flesh and bones enhance. Mysterious molecular chords, still and feats beyond words. Trillions working as one in a rich symphonic song. Each cell a sister or brother, making copies of each other. In a flash, a wound is healed, the blood is clotted and congealed. The cell's work is a conundrum, God's grace a work of wonder. We give homage to the cell, its intricacies made so well. Poem was written about 2 years ago, time of lockdown. It mentions my home village, Floddigary. Floddigary is a little village in the north end of Skye. There's a loch nearby, Loch Yim Bra, the loch of the jumping quernstones. Apparently when mills were being established by the landlords, they destroyed the people's quernstones so that crofters would use their mills. And the quernstones ended up in the bottom of the loch. The stones were rolled down a steep and rough slope into the loch, and hence the name of the loch. I say this was written at the time of lockdown. It's called As Jay na Cashke, after Easter. Haper la, Clódagar is skiavach ar a veriaf, and haar goram kun skaas en naar. A broodjen boeil is soortjen, spuiak en hauri na klaar aarwee. Zoals als machine killing in Nian. Nu hoan ja ruise leem se mire, maar een lanja loch leem in bra. Als een hound de skolle als een schoen, fallof, savach, gunun faasje. Dat was een geen zuige en huul. Har weer een fly a galaatje, waar weer eking is baas. Voor een herkan show, als Jane Kaasje. Clódagar is skiavach mar veriaf, de killer in Nian. Ach braun kudjach ga broem mar scala orn ulle, zijn de tjusjachen gorma graagach, en de leone oazach na playa. We jeug haar soel ri asheri ille, asheri vuye, hanik le kicht in Kaaske. After Easter, what a day, very beautiful as ever. The sky blue without a cloud, the braes yellow with primroses, the buttercup in his glorious yellow, and above me the chirping of birds. The lambs running and leaping and playing, like the glitter on Loch Liam na Bra, with the old schoolhouse above it, empty, silent, without one child, making me remember the state of the world where the pandemic is happening, where there is crisis and death this week after Easter. Clódagar beautiful as ever, with the warbling of birds, but grief too pressing in on us all, and on the beloved blue uniforms in this woeful pandemic year. And yet our eyes on another resurrection, a yellow resurrection, that came as Easter gift. Here another little poem I wrote at the time of the lockdown. It's about the virus and how did the virus originate? Was it in Wuhan food market? It was thought at the time that it could have originated there. How much was it due to the human treatment of animals? This poem is a reflection on that theme, humankind's relationship with the animal world. An bídig irash, the bite back. An broch is a rotan a marmots and crockle with a bídig irash. An stu is a feerkak a hule kretel and cage with a bídig irash. Er enige Wuhan an a bioitje nulle a bídig irash. Loggen de krinje a keer, a cushion en geetje, met pipietje garage. Le virus en niffel, die trui aan de srippe, dus een wietje garage. Asul geen ulle, moet de piep bij wulaan, moor wietje garage. Backing back, the badger and rat, the marmot and crocodile, they're biting back. The ostrich and peacock, all creatures in cages, they're biting back. As happened in Wuhan, all of the beasts are biting back. Cosmic law cries, don't cage us in or suffer a bite back. Venomous viruses will plague and ensnare with their biting back. The world is for all. If not, it will come, a great biting back. This poem is for Eric Liddell, who died in 1945. He was a great runner and sportsman, famous Scotsman, especially because he refused to race on a Sunday in his favourite race, the 100 metres, at the Olympics in Paris in 1924. He was afterwards a Christian missionary in China and died of a brain tumor in a Japanese internee camp in Weishan, China, in February 1945. When he died, his family were in Toronto, Canada. His life is celebrated in the film Chariots of Fire. The poem is called Races, and it's set in Weishan, Christmas 1944, when he was ill. It's imagining what he was thinking at the time and how he was feeling. And the rations and Romy, a rwy chimical nam llan, Colostio eltam, hier slaat, hunjuk, wonig me, isem gromi, woe. Krik Longast, Drochid Stamford, Stoke-on-Trent, Paris, Yadula a rwy chimical nam llan, a scanning le pian, a cynnych yn y reisionod agos am reis fôr il. Chanawn don y dynio lwa a'n reis, no don y dynio iol o'ch chi gen. Han je listen am fek mi flod. Gwbrach sy'n hwyl sio. Meet al friesiol am yn Canada. Mission am friesen o'ch cochi. Am fek mi gwbrach sif. Han je lis. No am fek mi mor in vik a ruku an yn Toronto. Ballo, fallo, ma vialo, en a henk mi harish, get ha mi ruo, an am hukov, trish is heather, manion en bria, dierach jolven yiv, blaien, smuntjen, mechan a brochan, a kuinichu, greg graag a nunie shiach, vadas, geide mi gaan, nur a brisjes mi an hip, Curia a larn am blind, agus bisho shachat. Races, Weishan, Christmas 1944. The races I was in run around in my head. Eltham College, 100 yards, 11 years of age, and I won, knowing well I was fast. Cricklockert, Stamford Bridge, Stoke-on-Trent, Paris, they are all running round in my head, a head that screams with pain. Remembering those races, and the other big race, the race that is not to the swift or favour to the learned. I don't know if I'll ever see Flo in this world. My dearest darling is in Canada, and I a prisoner of war. Will I ever see you all? Who knows, or will I see Maureen, born in Toronto? A blank wall in front of me, over which I cannot see. Although I was fast, I can't get to you, Trish and Heather, my beautiful girls. Photos of you only. Fragments, thoughts. My head is mush. Remembering love is the only worthwhile thing that will last. I'll surrender when I break the tape. He will put his hand in mine, and this will be over.
Mícheál Ó, Miles, as the chud focal, absolutely lovely, and thanks for making the journey from Skye. Wishing you a lovely stay in Cork, both of you lovely stay in Cork. Bhíonn buíochas a gháil arís le Mícheál, Marion agus Fiona. What a fabulous start way to kick off the winter warmer this year, winter warmer. We're not going to do Q&A, if you don't mind, Marlene and Tom going. We didn't want to cut you any shorter, your readings. So we're just going to take a quick break between the next set of readings at 7. Arist míle buíochas agus gomnigi soup as an godela den vela. Míle